Do you think they recognize the song?
They have no idea.
They don't?
They have no idea.
They're very excited, so if they don't actually recognize it, that's especially interesting. You want to tell them?
It is the Jets touchdown theme song. By the way,
we had many touchdowns today. I heard this song a lot today.
Sorry, you beat me to the joke, but they lost.
Barely. Barely.
They lost to Aaron Rodgers.
I know.
Okay. All right.
Worst kind of loss, by the way.
Okay,
Not only to Aaron Rodgers, but they actually played exceptionally well and still lost, which is very Jetsy.
We'll do a separate episode analyzing the history of Jets losses.
Yeah. A series. It's a multi-part series.
Exactly. Okay, Dan, so happy to have you here with me. Rifki, thank you for the intro. Thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I don't take it for granted at all that we are in New York City. We're in New York. This room is full. It's packed. People came out to spend an evening thinking about and talking about Israeli history. That means that, like me, we have lots of nerds in this room. And that's awesome. That's awesome. Dan, I don't know if this joke's gonna land, but I'm so happy to have you, my longtime friend.
I don't know. I stopped using that line.
Okay, on my podcast. Okay, good.
I stopped using it because Rachel Goldberg told me not to use it anymore.
I know. By the way, we all listen to Rachel Goldberg Poland.
Yeah,
That needs to happen. Okay. But Dan Senor is someone I've admired for a long time. You all may know him as a best-selling author, a brilliant commentator, senior advisor to political leaders, and the host of Call Me Back. But Dan, what makes you so fascinating for our conversation is that you sit at the intersection of politics, policy, and personal passion for Israel. You've lived this history in many ways. So Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm a big origin story kind of guy. When we started Unpacking Israeli History a few years ago, it was basically just a couple of us and a microphone, wondering if anyone out there actually wanted to listen to deep dives on things like the Suez Crisis or the Oslo Accords. And to be honest, at first we were not so sure. Do you know how many total downloads we had in our first week after launching the first episode? We had a total of 311. And how did we get those numbers? This is how we got those numbers. I used to have my old high school students. Anyone in here? Amazing. Shout out to Shauna Shrieky, probably a lot of the Gill kids. What they did is they would text their friends to listen to the show. That was our marketing strategy. And then, well, all of you and millions more changed all of that. You proved that Israeli history, knowing and engaging with history, with a story, means something. And so here we are in the iconic Kaufman Concert Hall on its legendary Geffen stage, bringing the show on the road, because this history isn't just a classroom subject at all. I believe that when you study the history, it can absolutely shape how we imagine the future. So let me set the stage here. All too often, unfortunately, we end up talking about Israel through the lens of war, crises, and moments of tragedy. Tonight with you, Dan, I want to flip the lens a little bit, though of course we'll talk about crises because that's what we do.
We're Jews.
Right, that's what we're Jews, exactly. Right. But what happens if we look at Israel's story not just through conflict, but also through the pursuit of peace? And it might sound naive, might sound silly to think that way, but I also am a big champion of David Ben-Gurion's idea that in Israel, to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. So tonight, we're going to think big together about the pursuit of peace, what it's looked like and what it's taught us, and maybe even what it could still mean. One quick note before we get going. This is being recorded live. So notwithstanding Rifki's jokes, please, if you think something's funny, laugh, clap, cry if something moves you. Like, be real, keep your phones on silent. And with that, let's get into the show. The next voice that you will hear is my podcast voice. You ready? You ready? When I say yalla, you will scream out, let's do this. And don't be too cool for that. Rifki, do I have the nod? Okay, here we go. Podcast voice. I don't even know what that means. There we go. Hey everyone, I'm Noam Weissman, and you're listening to Unpacking Israeli History, the podcast that takes a deep dive into some of the most intense, historically fascinating, and often misunderstood events and stories linked to Israeli history. This very special live episode of Unpacking Israeli History is generously sponsored by our friends at the Natan Fund, Larry and Andrea Gill, and Jody and Ari Storch, and Jean, Felice, Amiel, and Ariel Sabag. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode of Unpacking Israeli History, or even just saying, what's up? Please be in touch at noam@unpacked.media. That's noam@unpacked.media. We ready? Okay. Speaking of tonight's episode, it's an incredibly special one for three reasons. One, we're recording this live in front of a capacity crowd of close to 1,000 people at the iconic 92NY in New York City. Two, it's a topic and a conversation I've wanted to have for a very long time. And three, it's a conversation I've wanted to have for a very long time with someone in particular. Very special guest, a household name for many of our listeners, the one and only Dan Senor. I'm excited, you're excited, so I want to get straight into this one. Live audience, help me out here. Yalla?
Let's do this! אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
We, the people of Israel, are prepared and anxious to meet the representatives of our neighbors without any preconditions.
There are people in Israel and elsewhere say it's impossible to make peace between the Arabs and Israel or the Jewish people. I think they are wrong.
So here's what I want to try to cover over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, 4 segments, if you will. Segment 1, first I want to start with you, Dan, your life, your experiences, what it's been like, how you think about telling Israel's complicated story to different audiences, colleagues, listeners, family, friends. Segment 2, we're going to rewind the tape. Anyone listen to Bill Simmons? Yeah, maybe, yes, maybe. So we're going to look back at Israel's history through these, what he calls rewatchable moments. They're MVPs, unsung heroes. Both of you and I are big Bill Simmons guys, I believe.
Yes, I'm a religious listener. It was the first podcast I ever listened to.
Yes.
When someone said you got to try out this podcast technology, just as a listener, forget about it as a content provider. It was Bill Simmons that I was listening to, and I've been a junkie ever since.
Yeah, you and I, we're so similar, you and I.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, one of the most recent rewatchables is on the movie Death Wish, which I highly recommend.
Okay.
Watch the movie and then listen to the rewatchable.
Done. We'll do it. I have homework. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Segment 3. From there, we're going to fast forward. What's ahead? The big bets, the blind spots, the unexpected possibilities, whether it's peace, anti-Semitism, or just restoring some sense of calm. And then segment 4, if we get to it, who knows, is we're going to zoom out to right now and how we as podcasters, educators, Dan, you've become an educator.
I'm not an educator.
How we think about it is
I banter.
Okay.
I'm not an educator.
Okay, all right. Resist it. Okay. Jews, parents, spouses, non-Jews, whoever it is, how do you make sense of Israel at this moment? At the end, Rifki is going to come back to lead a Q&A with us. And then, as always, we're going to end the episode with 5 fast facts and 1 enduring lesson as I see it. Ready?
Let's do it.
Let's dive in. Dan, this is about your life right now. You ready for this?
It's very uncomfortable. I prefer asking the questions. This is a little awkward, but go ahead.
I like it. Dan,
Yes.
you are
It's like a deposition.
No,
Yeah.
you got this.
Yeah.
It's actually going to be very cute what we're about to do. You're very cute. You're one of the most listened to personalities when it comes to conversations around Israel and the Jewish people. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you're able to ask questions, like you said, and share opinions with such unique and varied life experiences. So what I'd love to do right now is I want to pull out 4 receipts from your life. And for you to share a bit about how it's impacted you personally, how it relates to your views on Israel, past, present, and future. 1 caveat, though. 2 minutes. 2 minutes per
receipt.
Per receipt. Sound good?
I'll do my best.
You got
cut
this.
me off.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yalla, let's do this. Okay, here we go. So I have here receipt number 1. People magazine. You see this? So I have, this is, maybe I shouldn't admit this, but this is like what I did on Shabbat afternoons in the late 90s to get through. I would reach People magazine. By the way, my mom's shaking her head. She says it's not true. Okay, I don't know. But people
Let her believe what she wants to believe, okay?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So, but here I have a picture of you and your wife, Campbell Brown. Look at this.
Wow.
Got this on eBay.
Wow.
Lovely. And you were the chief spokesperson and senior advisor to the U.S. presidential envoy in Iraq. How did an NJB, a nice Jewish boy, born in Utica, raised in Toronto, land in Iraq?
It was not a very linear or direct route. The old, Utica to Toronto to Baghdad route.
Right, sounds atypical.
Yeah, it's a little, no direct flights. The very short version is that I had spent a number of years working in the U.S. government in the 1990s, worked in the United States Senate, was very involved with political campaigns and on Capitol Hill, and then I left to go to business school to get my MBA. And then I came back and worked in private equity in DC, and a number of colleagues of mine who I'd worked with in Washington over the years wound up in the Bush administration. It was by this point, it's after 9/11. It looked increasingly likely the US was going into Afghanistan and then Iraq, and they needed help. And they asked me if I would take a 90-day leave from where I was working in private equity and go to Doha, actually, because that's where US Central Command was running the war out of, was in Doha. They assured me I'd never go to Baghdad. Or Iraq, and they assured me it would only be 90 days. I wound up going to Iraq, and I was there for 15 months. And so I was at Pentagon, I worked on behalf of the Pentagon, the White House, in Doha, and then ultimately in Iraq, and that is, you are right. By the way, you pulling up that magazine.
You look the exact same.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you tell my wife that? Seriously.
I will.
Because it's almost 20 years. Like that's
No, you look very
okay.
similar. I didn't mean to make that weird just now.
No. And so it's true. We met I met my wife in Iraq. She was there as a reporter, and only for a couple weeks. She came in. I was there for, as I said, over a year, but she came in for a couple weeks with NBC News, and as reporters often do, is they take their sources. People like I was the spokesman for the U.S. government in Iraq. So hey, we'll take you and your team out for dinner, and so Campbell said, oh, yeah, we'll take you. It's on us. And so they took us to the Al Rashid Hotel, which is where I lived for a little bit, which was a former Mukhabarat hotel in the Green Zone in Baghdad. And she makes a big deal that she's buying us dinner, me and my colleagues, and the bill comes, and she hands them an American Express card. Now, post-war Iraq,
it's not a good idea.
let's just say,
Not a good idea.
like the waiter was had no idea what to do with this American,
Yeah.
And I was, and so I ended up buying dinner because I figured it was in everyone's interest at that point.
Well
We didn't have any awkward moments, and I have so many more serious lessons about Iraq that we could get into because it has been informing a lot of my thinking about what's happening right now, actually in the Middle East and how Israel's doing, but. One story, as we're talking, that is reminding me, speaking of food.
You get to have 30 seconds for the story.
I'll do it in 20 seconds.
Okay, let's hear it.
I kept kosher in Baghdad.
Whoa.
Yeah. Something I don't really talk about. Certainly didn't talk about with the Iraqis.
Yeah. Wow.
So I kept kosher in Baghdad, and that was not easy.
Wow.
And so the hardest part was to get kosher meat. Obviously, it's not a big market these days in Iraq. And so Senator John Sununu, former Senator John Sununu from New Hampshire, was coming on a delegation led by Senator McCain to Iraq, a CODEL, what they call these CODELs. And they were coming to Iraq. It was August of 2003. And he said to me, I'm going to be, I know, like, people, whenever they come to Iraq, officials, they'd say, what do you need? I'd say, actually, where are you going on this trip? Yeah. He says, we're going to Israel, and then we're going to Iraq. I said, my sister lives in Jerusalem. And it's a little awkward, but if she gets you, like, a freezer pack...
Very good.
It's a true story.
Very good.
And a freezer pack with some kosher meats.
Yeah.
And so fast forward this story. So my sister finds him in his hotel in Jerusalem. Yeah. And then he comes. I didn't imagine they were coming on like a C-130, like into the image of U.S. soldiers and these senators carrying kosher meat packages into the Green Zone. It would like validate like every conspiracy theory about. I was like, this is a bad idea, but it did give me supply for a while. So, and by the way, Sununu, Lebanese Christian. So I had a Lebanese and Syrian Christian senator from the United States bringing me kosher meat from Israel. I mean,
amazing.
Come on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. You're not very good at knowing what 30 seconds is, but that was an amazing, it's an amazing story.
You assured me you would cut me off.
Okay,
so.
yes. But it was a great story.
Right,
Okay,
so-
all right. So I might not get to all this, but I want to show you another thing. There's something called...
I'll do the others.
Yeah,
I'll keep them tighter.
But here, we got... You guys know what this is? Waze. Okay, so let me say something about Waze. 2009, Startup Nation is published, goes on to list in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times as a bestseller. It helped shape global perceptions of Israel's innovation, and you said at the time that you didn't want it shelved in the Judaica or Middle East sections. So my question is, are you anti-Jewish? Just messing. My question is, why did this matter to you?
Because what we were trying to do with Startup Nation is tell a story about Israel that, I mean, now we all know Israel as Startup Nation and this innovation, incredibly dynamic innovation ecosystem. At the time, nobody did. And I wanted to tell this story of a slice of Israeli life that I knew a lot about, but I felt most people didn't.
Yep.
And I felt, and my big audience was not Jews. Well, I mean, obviously Jews I knew would consume it, but I wanted people who are consumers of business content or consumers of content about current events that are not just strolling through the Judaica section. So our book came out at the time as Too Big to Fail by Andrew Ross Sorkin, Freakonomics. We were with those books, and I wanted people who would stumble upon those books to stumble upon Startup Nation.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. So I want to tell you, just in line with that. So this is going to sound random, but it's connected, I promise you.
As long as you don't take up too much time, I'm fine.
Well played. So when I tell people that, Unpacking Israeli History is the most downloaded Jewish podcast in the world, they say, great, you want to tell your mom about that? She should be so proud. And then do you know what the real response is? What about Dan Senor? So, and I'm like, okay, but he's in a different category. You're in the category of media and politics. Right. And so you're in that category of podcast creation. And I've said to my wife, I know when she's cheating on me, when I catch the Bluetooth and she's in the car and I'm like, are you listening to Dan right now? Is that what's happening?
That's hilarious.
So she's in the front row right there.
Excellent. We'll talk later.
So there you have it. Okay, I took my time on that one. Okay. I want to show one more thing to everyone here. This is ARC Media. This is an oversized Call Me Back subscription receipt. So September 2020.
They all know that because they're all subscribers.
Right.
Everyone here.
Understood.
Yeah.
So September 25, your Call Me Back podcast, a success story in so many ways, but I want to get super real with you here, podcast to podcast host. We're all alone in this iconic theater. No one's listening in. It's just us. And I'd love to know what the most unexpected food for thought you've received over the years has been, having had so many fascinating guests on your show. Something that's like so unexpected, but food for thought that you have received, and you're like, wow, that is an insight.
There's a lot of them. I actually, one of the reasons I love doing the podcast is for this reason, because we tend to think, podcast hosts, that we're in control of the conversation, but the most interesting conversations are when you're leading a discussion, you're actually learning in real time, and suddenly Ilan and I will, my producer will think the conversation's going in one way, the way we planned it out, and we realize this person said something really interesting and it's going another way. I will say the most difficult, insight I have gained, mostly from my Israeli listeners, is how my Israeli guests, not all of them, but some of them, although I'm increasingly hearing this insight, is this balance they're clearly trying to strike between obviously wanting to do everything to get all the hostages home, and that this is so much about Israeli solidarity, and they're so committed to it, and they, for all the obvious reasons everyone in this room understands, and this fear they have that it may not be in Hamas's interest, given who Hamas is, to make that possible. And that it will, Gilad Shalit was held for 5 years. It may be in their interest to try to hold on to some of the hostages for much longer than I think is in anyone's time horizon. And I'm hearing this more and more from Israelis, and how they strike that balance between the aspiration and what they fear is a reality has really been rocking me recently.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. we've learned a lot about your life, Arc Media, Call Me Back, subscriptions. We skipped over Genius of Israel.
Come on.
You need another plug?
Yeah.
Okay, so Genius of Israel, Dan Senor and Saul Singer. Great stuff. Okay.
By the way, I want to say,
Yeah.
we argue in that book that Israel is the greatest place in the world to raise children, to raise Jewish children, and I still believe that holds today, even after the hell that Israel has been through the last 2 years.
Well,
and you talk about receipts. I've got the receipts. I've got the data to prove it.
I mean, the proof is that the world happiness rankings of Israel, across the world, Israel's always top 10,
Right.
even when it's going through hell.
Right.
Okay, I want to do some...
And Israelis are still producing a lot of babies. They're the only country in the world that most countries in the world, as they get economically more productive, they get less reproductive. I mean, it's like an ironclad rule of economic life and demographic fact of life. Israel's the only country that has defied that. It's a country that's gotten wealthier and wealthier, and they're having more and more children. And it's not just the Haredim, it's all across Israeli life. That tells you more about Israeli optimism for the future, despite the shattering they've experienced, than anything else.
Okay, I want to go to history. You and I, we spoke about this. We're Bill Simmons junkies. We listen to his content. He's been a podcast role model for you, a podcast role model for me. If you don't know him, everyone, he is a sports writer turned podcaster. He started The Ringer. One of his shows is called The Rewatchables, and it's genius. They take classic movies like The Godfather, always wondering when's the right time to watch Godfather with my son? What's the earliest age?
I've watched it with both our sons, and we probably watched it with them when they were too young. So,
So my
I mean,
son's
wait
12,
till they get out of the womb,
Okay.
and then, yeah.
They're good.
Yeah.
So my son's 12, my daughters are...
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, his 12's okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So they're 10, 8, or 7. They're here. And I have a 2-year-old also. That was irrelevant. Okay, so they take... So what the Rewatchables does, it goes through great movies, The Godfather, it breaks them down, best scene, most rewatchable moment, MVP, unsung hero, all that stuff. So tonight we're stealing that idea, and instead of movies, we're gonna rewatch 3 big peace moments in Israeli history. Anyone who listens to the podcast knows I believe there is such a necessity to learn about the story of Israel before you have all of your perspectives about Israel. You got to actually have an informed perspective. So I want to do Camp David, I want to do Oslo, I want to do the Abraham Accords. And Dan, I'm going to start with telling a short background for each story. Then for each one, you and I are going to pick the MVP, that person, the idea or institution that made it happen. We're going to pick an unsung hero, the overlooked force that changed the game. And if either of us is feeling inspired, we'll come up with some other categories, okay? So let's start at Camp David. Some history, folks. That's what you're here for on a Sunday night. Some history. November 1977, Camp David, just 4 years after the Yom Kippur War, when Egypt and Syria surprise attacked Israel on the Jewish people's holiest day. More than 2,000 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, around 2,500, were killed in 3 weeks. Morale was shattered. And then, out of nowhere, Anwar Sadat, the man who architected that war, lands in Jerusalem. He's shaking hands with Ariel Sharon, with Moshe Dayan, with Golda Meir, Prime Minister Menachem Begin. A year later, Sadat and Begin meet at Camp David with Jimmy Carter, hammering out the peace accord. By 79, it's signed. And through all the tension since, that peace has held. So let's go through the MVPs and the unsung heroes. So I'm the host. I go first. To me, undoubtedly, the MVP. Okay, and we could do like
I bet we're going to agree.
Okay. I don't know. Let's see. So to me, undoubtedly, it's Anwar Sadat.
What? Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Planned that. He's like Menachem
No,
Begin,
I was
Anwar
gonna
Sadat. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, but do you want to make your case for Sadat?
Yeah, of course I want to make my case.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this was a man who in the 1950s literally wrote a love letter to Hitler, which, by the way, is like I wouldn't pick him as a top 5 person to write a love letter to.
Right.
It's not on my bingo card of love letters. But so he wrote a love letter to Hitler in an Egyptian paper. In 73, he planned the most traumatic war in Israeli history, at least until October 7th. He was a devout Muslim, a proud Egyptian, Nasser's successor. He had every reason not to make peace. He had every reason. And yet in 77, he stunned his own parliament by saying, I won't refuse to go to their own home, to the Knesset itself, to discuss peace. Days later, Begin invited him. And within the week, he was in Israel. They were on alert. They thought something bad might happen. Their security was ramped up. And ultimately, that bravery cost him his life. He was assassinated in 1981 by an Islamic Jihad member for daring to choose peace. But he also saved countless others by ending decades of war between neighbors. For me, when someone sacrifices and makes things happen and takes that first step, he's the MVP.
Okay. Few things. First of all, on the story of his visit to Jerusalem, amazing story, his visit to Israel, there was a poll taken in Israel a few days before his visit where Begin at this point was pushing, pretty aggressively, at least back-channeling for this peace agreement. Polls taken, overwhelming majority of Israelis are against any kind of deal, against giving up the Sinai. Sadat comes to Israel, poll taken a few days later, after he speaks before the Knesset, says, I recognize Israel's right to exist. Overwhelming majority of Israelis support a peace deal, meaning because they believed, to your point, that he was sincere about this. And it was a dramatic visit. Another fun little fact there is, he wanted to come during the day. When he arrived, it was a Saturday on that date. And he was supposed to land during the day. And Begin called him and said, can you please come after Shabbat? Because I want to greet you at the airport, but I can't travel on Shabbat, which Sadat did. Moved his arrival time. I understand the accolades you want to give to Sadat, but also remember he was a visionary in part because he knew what was in Egypt's long-term strategic interest. And given what was going on in the Cold War, and given the degree to which Egypt was perceived, and literally was a satellite of the Soviet Union, and Sadat realized that Egypt could only lose it's enough already. They've been losing war after war after war against Israel, and they want to cast their lot with the West. And casting the lot with the West means the United States and Israel. So, and he wanted to break with the Arab bloc. He wanted to break with Syria. So, yes,
So you don't think he's the MVP?
No, I think he's. I'm going to say it.
Yeah,
obviously, Menachem Begin is the MVP.
Okay.
I'm kind of disgusted that he wasn't yours.
Okay.
But I'll learn to live with that. And
by the way, probably most of the rest of the room is probably disappointed, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But listen.
Okay, I say you're a Sadat guy. I get it. Okay, so I'll be the Begin guy. All right. My son, who's in high school in New York, he did a paper last year. The class, it was a history class, a 20th century history, and to pick one document from the 20th century. It could be anything. And then kind of study that document and then do the history around it. So he did the Camp David Accords.
Yeah.
And so it was fun watching it through his eyes. And one of the things that I was struck by was look at the Knesset debates when they're voting on the agreement. And the vitriol being directed at Begin from the right. And it's wild to go back and read the stuff they were saying about him. And he really, really put his political base at risk to do this. And you realize from that story, only Begin was the only political figure in Israel who could have pulled that off, who could have delivered the hard right, the center, and obviously the left was on board with it. But he was the only one who could have held all that together.
So there's a common theme there. The common theme is sacrifice, though, the willing to actually make a claim against the norm to achieve whatever you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and look, he believed it was in his country's interest too. So in that sense, he and Sadat were very similar. He had similar, motivations.
Do you know what Golda Meir said about Menachem Begin when he got
She wouldn't get the Nobel Prize.
She said he doesn't deserve a Nobel Prize, he deserves an Oscar.
Right. That's why I'm always amused with those kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Because when people think Israeli politics is small-minded and petty today, I'm like, you just don't know your history.
You gotta learn Israeli history. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Listen,
by the way, I just have to give a shout out. Open Door Media, we did co-produce a film on Menachem Begin, so I kind of like Menachem Begin too.
Okay.
All right. I want to know, do you have an unsung hero, or should we skip this one?
No, Begin is the.
Okay, Begin can't be MVP and unsung hero.
I'll tell you the unsung hero is. The IDF. basically Egypt and the Egyptian leadership thought they had Israel on its back in the invasion of Yom Kippur, 1973. And the fact that in a matter of weeks, Israel so turned around that war. And in fact, if you look at the Israeli wars that are studied at U.S. military academies today, everyone thinks it's a Six-Day War, it's 67 war. It's not.
73.
It's 73, because what 73 was Israel, everyone just assumed Israel was doomed, and the fact that in less than 3 weeks they turned it around. And that was the wake-up call to Sadat, that these people are not going anywhere. So we got to figure out how to work with them. And so that is the strength of the IDF contributing to diplomacy.
That is so interesting. What I had with in my Bill Simmons sort of language, I had the Miracle on Ice, Nobody Believed in Us team. I had the 1973 generals. That's what I had.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, I had that. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to skip my unsung hero.
Fine.
All right, cool.
I mean, I'm conscious of time.
Okay, good.
At least one of us.
One of us has to be. Okay, Oslo. Here we go. Oslo. Oh, this is going to be fun, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there tension in the room right now? Oslo. When people think of Israeli-Palestinian peace, they usually think of Oslo. But Oslo wasn't exactly a peace deal. It was a set of interim agreements between Israel and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, meant to lead to peace. There were two accords, 1993 and 1995. They brought mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO. They created the Palestinian Authority to govern Palestinians in the interim, and they laid a framework for future negotiations on borders, refugees, and Jerusalem, okay? So, you're my guest. I want you to go first. Who's your MVP for this one? And I'm sensing from the look on your face, you don't have an MVP.
You know, I don't. I guess the MVP, this is going to sound counterintuitive, the MVP from that whole period from Oslo right through to Camp David, basically Camp David and Camp David II, Camp David II right back to Oslo, is Bill Clinton, because he tells the truth about what actually happened in the 1990s. So he's my unsung hero, I guess, because he tells the truth about what happened. But I have a...
Can you do Bill Simmons like a different thing? Like Bill Simmons does these things called like what ifs.
Sure.
So can you do like a what if? Do you have a what if for Oslo?
Yes.
Okay, let me hear your what if.
What if Yitzhak Rabin had not been assassinated? Hear me out. There's this narrative that is now like etched in, stone among elites and intellectuals and observers of Middle East affairs, that Oslo was a smashing success and it was on course to being fully implemented. And then Rabin was assassinated and Oslo went up in flames as a result. And that is why Oslo failed. It was the assassination of the Israeli prime minister who had pushed it through. That is really historically not correct. Oslo, before Rabin's assassination, was facing major obstacles on implementation. There was serious issues with Arafat's, which we now know for sure, Arafat's commitment to the full implementation of Oslo. And Israel was heading for an election between Rabin, and it was probably going to be Netanyahu. And Rabin had one of two choices heading into that election. Either begin to move away from Oslo because it wasn't working and it wasn't being properly implemented, and the other side was not operating in good faith, or lean into Oslo and really have an election where Oslo is the debate. Let's have a real political debate about this, and the country can choose which direction it wants to go. Now, when Rabin was assassinated, not only was Israel denied the continued service of a great Israeli leader, Yitzhak Rabin, but it was denied the opportunity to give Rabin the opportunity to say, this isn't working, let me explain why, or it must work, and let me tell you why, and I'm willing to stake my premiership on it. And that, I think, would have been so healthy for the Israeli polity, and actually for the diaspora too, for us to actually have a serious discussion about whether or not this was working, rather than it just be written off as the failure that followed the real tragic assassination of the prime minister.
That is always a what if, and I still have that memory of my parents coming downstairs. I think it was after Shabbat, telling us.
It was after Shabbat.
Telling me and my older brother Hanan, who's here also, about how that Rabin was assassinated. Just that moment.
I remember exactly where I was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where were you?
I was up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I was visiting my godfather, my dad's best friend, and I was staying with him, and he walked. I just remember him telling me. He says they killed Rabin. I was so confused when he said they. I just assumed it was like a yeah.
It was really horrific. For me, I am going to say, I said before that in the Egyptian Accords, I think it's important. I said the Camp David Accords, I'm sorry, that Sadat is my MVP. And I think that seeing Arab leadership take that sacrifice, and ultimately Sadat sacrificed his life for the cause. Now, people here listening might agree, might disagree with Rabin's policies, but he was a hero throughout Israeli history, one of the most decorated soldier in Israeli history. And he
was a real hawk for most of his career.
He was for a lot of his career.
Yeah.
But he said, this is something that I want to do right now. And he said, Ani anavet. You remember that line? I will navigate. Yeah. I will figure this out. And he made that decision to recognize the PLO. So for me, I'm giving him the MVP award. He won the Nobel Prize. I'm not giving it to Arafat. I don't give Arafat the MVP. I'm not going to give it to him.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Arafat, he failed to crack down on the rampant terrorism at the time, and he was even recorded at a mosque in South Africa, where I'm going soon. He called for jihad to liberate Jerusalem. So
and as Dennis Ross points out, he never actually explained to the Palestinian people, unlike Sadat, by the way. Sadat explained to the Egyptian people what he was doing and why he was doing it. Arafat never explained to the Palestinian people. Ross says in his book, The Missing Piece, one of the biggest failures of Oslo was the U.S. never insisted that Arafat, the Israeli leadership was preparing the Israeli people for what was coming. Arafat never really communicated to the Palestinian people. It's still the problem today. It's still why the entire education system in the West Bank is still teaching about the eradication of the Jewish people. That is not necessarily like conditions for learning to live peacefully with a Jewish state next to us. And Arafat never did that hard work. They never really required him to do it.
So the education is so significant in the Palestinian authorities. I just want to, in the audience, we have Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, who is a leading thinker in the Palestinian world. And
he's been a guest on both our podcasts.
He's been a guest on both of our podcasts, and he is somebody who's trying to make...
We won't ask him which was a better experience, but it was just, they were both great.
They were both great.
Everyone gets a trophy.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Mine in the Jewish world, you're in the media, whatever that. Okay, I'm going to skip the unsung hero again on this one. Okay, Abraham Accords, and again, I want to go through peace. I want to understand how peace was made through these different moments. Abraham Accords, 2020 agreements, normalized relations between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. The name says it all, Jews and Muslims, children of Abraham. It opened the door to regional peace, economic cooperation, and security ties. Briefly, Dan, give me your MVP, and I'm going to give you my unsung hero.
I have both, though. I have an MVP and an unsung hero.
So tell me your MVP. Then I get unsung hero.
Okay,
and then you get unsung hero.
There's no question that without Jared Kushner being in the White House and being... No,
I'm not disagreeing with you. You took my unsung hero.
Oh. Yeah, no, but there's just no question that you've never had an official so close to the president, who's in the West Wing of the White House, who clearly has the president's ear and can truly represent the president throughout the Middle East. Because in the Middle East, especially in the Arab Muslim world, they understand family. When someone comes on behalf of the family. And the fact that Jared made this one of the 2 or 3 most important things he worked on, it wouldn't have happened without him. But I do have an unsung hero.
Okay, you get to go again.
I get to go again, or you want to go first?
Oh, give me your unsung hero.
Mohammed bin Salman.
MBS.
The crown prince of Saudi Arabia, because it wouldn't have happened had he not basically blessed it. Had he not told the Emiratis and the Bahrainis, you should do this. I met with him in 2018 at a very small dinner with a few Jewish leaders in LA. He was here for 2 weeks, and he was in the US for a couple of weeks. And at that dinner, all I can say is I could not believe what he was saying about Israel. And it was so clear to me then that he had made the decision that Israel is part of the future of the Middle East, and he wanted to bet on the future. And it was in Saudi, back to our point about Sadat, it was in Saudi's interest to get this normalization integration process going. And I obviously he didn't want to go first, but he wanted the process to get moving, and the Emiratis and the Bahrainis wouldn't have done it without his.
That's why I was wondering if Mohammed bin Zayed might be an MVP candidate, also the UAE leader. He's up there also.
Yeah.
But I want to say my unsung hero was actually Jared Kushner, and I want to tell you a quick story. I have a personal connection here. The connection is I once played basketball against his brother Josh in yeshiva. Okay, so we were in the championship. It was Mivaseret against Reshit. And it was a big deal, okay? And
I know, I mean, right up there with like the Jets game today.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking.
It was big, big. And let me just tell you this story. So Josh, literally, we are winning the game, and we're the better team, okay? And Josh Kushner, who's okay, he's solid, whatever, he's solid. It's the end of the game, 5, 4, 3, and he's not going to give it to Josh Kushner. They give it to Josh Kushner, buzzer beater, to beat us, to win the game against me. I still have nightmares about that game, and I sometimes have to imagine that, like, before he goes to sleep at night, he's like Carly Kloss. Listen, Carly, listen to what I did. I hit a buzzer beater in yeshiva.
You know, for a guy who's very concerned about managing time, that was quite a... I'm sitting here in real time.
That's not part of Israeli history?
Where is he going with this story?
That's it. That's the story.
Yeah, no, it's a good story, really.
Okay, buzzer beater, okay. All right, Dan, let's look forward.
Yeah.
That was our rewatchables. We did it.
Yep.
3 big moments. We could go through other categories. We'll do that another time. But I want to talk about where we are right now and looking to the future. I want to shift to that discussion. We are almost 2 years since the 7th of October. And I want to start with, as odd as it sounds, but some positives. They're often very, from the military perspective, Iran was humbled in June. Its nuclear program was severely set back. How much, we don't know exactly, but a lot, okay? Hezbollah is a shell of itself. The Lebanese government has demanded they disarm, unquestionably an amazing thing. Syria is reportedly on the brink of signing a security agreement with Israel. Could you imagine that on October 6, 2023? Hard to imagine. But on the other hand, it's not all sunshine and roses. Israel still bogged down in Gaza nearly 2 years later. Over 900 soldiers have been killed. Nearly 50 hostages remain in the tunnels. 28 are dead. To our knowledge, around 20 are still alive. Over 60,000 Palestinians have been killed. But in terrible, heartbreaking condition, this is where we are. Internationally, this is something you've spoken about on your podcast. Israel is becoming a pariah. This is the greatest level of isolation it's faced in decades. Anti-Zionism has been normalized and mainstreamed in many countries across the Western world. Anti-Semitism is at the highest it's been in decades. There are also internal divisions, and people don't like talking about this, but there are internal divisions in Israeli society as well. A lot of internal divisions, many, many internal divisions. So that's where we're at. Some triumphs, some problems. I want to discuss what those triumphs and problems mean for the future of the region and the Jewish people as a whole. So I have 3 big questions. Question number 1 is, we all know the cliche, Israel has a PR problem. But I want to really talk about what that means. The conventional wisdom is this: Israelis are terrible at hasbara. They're terrible at PR. Or Israelis don't understand why hasbara is important. I think that's a misdiagnosis. I think the issue goes a lot deeper, a lot deeper, and there are a number of thinkers I want to reference here. The first is Yonit Levy. She is an Israeli news anchor and journalist and a fellow podcaster. We should start a club. She and others, by the way, people who love Israel and are fiercely loyal to it, have said the following sentence: Israel doesn't have a hasbara problem right now. Israel has an Israel problem. Meaning, it's not that Israel is doing a bad job explaining why they are in Gaza, or why this war is continuing, or why it's being handled the way it is. What she's saying is sometimes Israeli policies are just bad, hard to defend. It's possible. And I'm an Israeli history guy, and I go back to the 1950s and the 1960s. I think about the diplomats and the foreign ministers of the time, Abba Eban, one of the great spokespeople for the Jewish people and for Israel, Moshe Sharet. Both of them went on record in the 1950s, whether it was after the Lavon affair in 1954, definitely going to do an episode on that. Kibbutz in 1953, we did an episode on that, and they basically said, what the heck? Why are you making our jobs so difficult to be out there? Those weren't hasbara issues, those were policy issues that were very, very hard to defend. So that was a long preamble, but I wanted to give that history, and I don't like to just be superficial about these ideas. I really want to go into this sort of thing. Do you agree with Yonit Levy that Israel's problem isn't just with hasbara, but with policies that might make Israel hard to defend in the West? And part two of the question is, what is the American or international Jewish community's role here, if any?
I disagree with Yonit, who's a friend, and I've been on her podcast a couple times. She's great, but she's no Noam. I just want you to know that. I disagree because I would preface it or frame it differently. Israel is a country. Israel is a real country. Real countries have to make difficult decisions. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong, right? A country at war, and given that Israel has basically been at war in some form, as you cover extensively since its founding, and is facing the seven-front war, now fewer fronts, thank God, over the last 2 years, in circumstances that no country in modern history has ever had to experience. On top of the fact, when I say, multiple fronts, a huge percentage of your population being held in tunnels, held hostage, and not like on the other side of the world, but like 40 miles from Tel Aviv, 50 miles from Tel Aviv, this labyrinth of this tunnel system that Israel has to deal with, this international PR or international media and social media obsession with Israel. Like this war has been covered like no war in history has ever been covered. The only thing you compare it to is the Vietnam War, but that was before social media, so it wasn't covered like this. So does that mean that Israel's trying to navigate these impossible circumstances gets everything right? No. Does it mean that it is perfect? No. Does it mean that it loses a little bit of its innocence in trying to defend its existence? Of course. Again, point to me another country that wouldn't have that, like getting something's right and getting something's wrong. And somehow with Israel, leave the world aside, somehow with Israel, we want to have this conversation. We need to put it all on the table. Israel's in the wrong here. No, Israel is a country. And it is crazy to me, Noam, that because Israel doesn't get everything right in trying to navigate this impossible war, this problem from hell it's dealing with, that suddenly we subject ourselves to debates about, well, does Israel have a right to exist? Are you a Zionist? Are you an anti-Zionist? Imagine any other war in the world where people would say, well, does Vietnam have a right to, does America have a right to exist? But somehow with Israel, because of it being brutally attacked and subjected to what has been an existential crisis, we now have to defend whether it has a right to exist all the way back to its founding in the 40s. So Israel doesn't have an Israel problem. We need to start explaining to people that Israel is a normal country.
I think the audience liked that one.
I mean, they're debating between that and the Josh Kushner buzzer beater. It's just sort of like, yeah.
I have so much I want to say.
Oh, go ahead.
No. And think through your last point. My producers are saying to move on, but it's hard for me on this one. It's not that I disagree with you. I don't disagree with anything that you just said about people's obsession with Israel, obsession with maligning Israel. I just recorded, we haven't released it yet, but I recorded talking about the claim about Israel being genocidal right now. I reminded our audience that Israel has been accused of genocide in 48. Israel was accused of genocide in 67. Abba Eban was defending Israel before there were settlements. There was a song, Ha'olam Kulo Negdenu, the whole world is against us, right? And that was created before settlements were developed. And so a huge part of me is like, yeah, there is a strange obsession with maligning Israel no matter what. The question is, that I do think that young people are struggling with, is not the question of whether or not Israel has a Hasbara issue or an Israel issue, but whether or not Israel, as certainly at this point in the war, is acting in this war in a just way as it was in the first half of the war. And that is, I think, a discussion that many Israelis debate themselves. And I think that the American Jewish community is thinking through a lot right now. So I just want to add, the nuance there to me is not whether or not Israel has a right to exist. All of us should fight like crazy to make sure no one talks like that. Whether or not Zionism has a right, we don't dare those conversations to take place. But there are difficult conversations that need to be asked at certain points in Israeli history. That's what we do on the podcast. We go through Israeli history, we show the good and the bad and the ugly, and we show the different sides of the issues because we deeply, deeply believe in viewpoint diversity. The problem is so many of us struggle with this nonstop being attacked, and therefore don't have the ability to actually talk thoughtfully about difficult topics like this.
Okay,
so,
hold on. I know, I'll be really quick.
I won't get the clap you got for that, I know.
I want just to say this real quickly. First of all, if you look at what has happened over the summer, basically, over the last summer to now, the three big themes in the attack against Israel, okay, the three big themes in the media attack, the international community, was one, starvation, mass famine campaign. There's no famine. By the way, there is no famine in Gaza. There's not, okay? There's not, okay? I'm not saying there's not a humanitarian crisis. There is, as there is in every war zone, especially every urban war zone in history. The challenge of getting humanitarian aid to the local population whose army you're fighting, especially in this case when the army is using that population and wanting them to suffer in order to protect themselves, is like, as I said earlier, it's a problem from hell. But there's no famine, there's no mass starvation. Two, genocide. This whole idea, I mean, as you will say, and we should listen to your podcast, there is, of course, no genocide. And three, that this targeting, by the way, as I said this morning on Fareed Zakaria's show, because they brought up genocide and they want to get bogged down, us getting bogged down in these technical terms about, what was the intent? It's a very simple question. Anyone who wants to say that Israel is engaged in genocide, simple question is this. What would happen if Israel laid down its arms? Right. If Israel laid down its arms, there would be no Israel. If Hamas laid down its arms, Palestinian civilians would be fine. So that's all you need to know. Right. And therefore, if you want to know who's responsible for genocide, but the point here is each one, the genocide, the famine campaign, and then the other theme of the summer was targeting journalists. Israel's targeting Palestinian journalists, okay? What is so creepy about all three of those charges is it's actually, all three of them is what Hamas is doing, right? Hamas attempted a genocide on October 7th. Hamas actually not only is happy to starve its own citizens, its own Palestinians, but as we've seen, is deliberately starving Israeli hostages. And there is zero dissent allowed. There's no vibrant journalist community. So we are now busy having these moral dilemmas about things that Israel has not done and that actually Hamas is deliberately doing. It's a brilliant Orwellian flip of the script.
Okay, my final question in this segment is based on something you discussed with Israeli journalist Nadav Eyal on your podcast. You asked him, what's the one thing Israelis get wrong about diaspora Jews and vice versa? And I want to hear your opinion on that. But for our purposes, I think this is something many people in the room struggle with. What role should diaspora Jewry play in the Israeli story, in Israeli policy, in Israeli life generally, if any? Is our role to platform Israelis, give them space? Is the Jewish Americans' role to be partners, to support something else entirely? What do you view as the job of the Jewish American right now?
The two are very connected, those two questions, because I often hear from Israeli friends who say, why isn't the diaspora banging on the Israeli government the way we Israelis are banging on the Israeli government? Because they say, we're sitting here, we're trying to, advocate for change, and you could be so helpful here, and you're not. Or at least much of the diaspora is they claim not helping with that. And my response to that is, it's not our role, okay? Israel is under siege internationally, under siege. And if you want to be part of the Israeli democratic experiment, and my mother made Aliyah, I have 2 sisters who have made Aliyah, I have 3 nieces, I have 3 nephews, they're all in and out of the army, especially over the last couple of years. They have chosen to be part of the Israeli democratic experiment, and they can go there, and some of them are protesting on Saturday night, and some of them chose assertively not to protest Saturday night because they thought it was inappropriate, and they're having arguments and debates, and their children and my nephews and nieces are risking their lives. They're in it, okay? We're not. So all I ask of the diaspora is to give Israel, you don't have to be a cheerleader for Israel. Give Israel the benefit of the doubt, okay? Just give Israel, think about it this way. The analogy I give is this, okay? Think of Israel as your child. I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but the connection. You give your child the benefit of the doubt. Your kid gets in trouble at school, you get a call from the school, right? Your immediate reaction is not to believe the worst things that a school says about your child acting out. Your immediate reaction is, okay, I hear you. I want to talk to my child and get to the bottom of it, because there's probably 2 sides of the story, and I have confidence that my child is not perniciously acting out. Not to say your child's always going to be right. It's to say you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And that is, I think, how we should think about Israel. It's, again, back to my earlier point, it's a normal country. So when it makes mistakes, criticize it. But it's not our role, it shouldn't be, to be out there joining the jackals who are just slamming Israel in the international press and in international institutions. Because when members of the diaspora do it, when I go on TV and I'm defending Israel and I hear anchors of shows cite other members of the diaspora in the criticisms, it's like, really? Like, is that really what your contribution is to just joining the kind of the gang up on Israel? Is, to me, it's not a role.
Before we invite Rifki back on stage to moderate some Q&A, I want to stop for a second and reflect on what's happening right now. The fact that you and I are here right now, coming together in this way, with almost 1,000 people in the audience who came to talk and think about Israeli history, this doesn't happen very often. Like, I think it's actually mesmerizing in some ways that people are out here on a Sunday night, 1,000 people, to hear the story of Israel, to hear about the history of Israel, to talk these ideas through together. And I think that's special in and of itself. There are many differences between our shows. There are also similarities, in particular, the challenges that our listeners face, especially as it relates to their Judaism and to Israel. And by the way, many, for both of us, non-Jewish listeners across the globe who are also grappling with and thinking about this. Many. And Dan, I'm guessing that we get similar types of questions from people who are thinking not only about individual episodes, but the big picture. So I want to pick a question that I think comes up often, or maybe it's not a question, but it's a framing. It's, I don't trust, this is the line that we kind of often hear. I don't trust legacy institutions or mainstream media, but I trust your podcast. And the question is why? Why is it that people, from your perspective, I have thoughts, I've been thinking about this for my podcast that I host, but why your podcast do you think that people turn to you and they say, I could, like, they feel a level of trust?
It's something I've tried to understand. I don't really understand. I do know one of the most revealing conversations I had a couple months after October 7th about my podcast was in London, and I was meeting with a top Saudi diplomat in the UK, and he requested the meeting, and I realized through the course of the meeting that he's a regular listener to call me back. I didn't know that going into the meeting, and he starts citing different episodes, and I was flattered. But at some point I said, with all, I am flattered, but like, why? why are you listening to this podcast? And he said, it's the only way I really feel I get a sense for the conversation happening inside Israel. And he says, as a diplomat, we get the official translations of the prime minister's statements from the prime minister, Israeli prime minister's office. We get the IDF spokesperson's statements, but I don't hear the conversation happening in Israel, like Amit Segel and Nadav Ayel, having a real discussion about different points of view. We don't get to hear how Israelis are sorting through these times. And I think at the end of the day, Noam, that's what I'm trying to do, is present to the world the dilemmas, the discussions, and the challenges that Israelis are wrestling with, and the diaspora, as we sort through this impossible period. And I think for people to be able to access those kinds of conversations and really hear how Israelis and supporters of Israel are wrestling with this, maddening period is something you're just not going to get from legacy media.
Right. For me, on this one, I think that a lot of it has to do, I hear this from listeners all the time. We get a number of emails every single week, and we engage with our audience. We take community very seriously. And what I hear is there was a diplomat stationed in Israel who reached out, and he said, we listen to Unpacking Israeli History all the time to help us actually inform our decisions about policy in Israel and to represent our governments. We don't always do a great job shifting their perceptions, but we use that podcast to do this. And I think one of the reasons that I've been reflecting, and our team at Open Door Media in general has been reflecting on, but I think about this very often, is I struggle with issues. I genuinely struggle with issues. I go through that process of exploring, and you hear it on the podcast. And I think what I try to do is I give permission to people to explore. And because if I have all of the answers all the time, then, okay, that guy's got all the answers. But if I genuinely am exploring something and sometimes even change my mind, what that does to the listener is they say, oh, I can explore. Oh, I can change my mind on an issue. And it's this very intimate relationship with the listeners. That's what we have with the podcast. We're in their ears. Mm-hmm. They're running, they're doing chores, they're doing dishes, they're in the car, in the subway, and we are with them.
We're their inner monologue.
And it's weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird. But it's also really special. So I think we have this obligation to model changes we want to see in people ourselves. If we're able to model that ourselves, then I think that it lends credibility to the person listening to say, oh, I can think about something a little bit differently than I did before. So for me, that is how I think about it. So I want to thank you. We're now going to have Q&A. We're going to do a Q&A. I'm going to hand it to Rivki.
Hello. Hi. A very fast Q&A. We know it's very late. We got a ton of questions, many of them that we want to address, but instead, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to hold them to a part 2, a part 3, part 4, etc. That was amazing. So I just want to start with a big round of applause. That was incredible. So we're going to move straight to the Q&A, and remember, a little maybe more concise, a little brevity for going forward. But I'm going to start with question 1. There's just, taking the moderator's privilege a little bit over here. There's actually a question from me. I'm just curious. It's right before Rosh Hashanah, right? Just in a few weeks, the Jewish New Year. Many of us, communally, individually, we spend a lot of that time introspecting, especially the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, thinking about how we might want to change things, how we might want to better ourselves in the new year. If you could speak, and this is a little different than what we've been doing here, if you could speak to every Jew in the world right now, heading into the upcoming Jewish New Year, what would you say to them? What's your Rosh Hashanah message? Dan, we'll start with you if you're comfortable. No pressure.
I think the tendency of a lot of rabbis in their sermons on the high holidays will be to talk about Israel. Or to talk about politics in the U.S. or whatever is polarizing us at the moment. And my message during the holidays would be every Jew should be encouraged to double down on Judaism. That was a big focus of the talk I gave when I did the State of World Jewry address right here where you're standing, which is that if the whole existence and expression of Jewish community and Jewish life cannot be just fighting and debating these very complicated policy issues and political issues and geopolitical issues and complaining about the rising anti-Semitism, and we should be worried about it. It's alarming. But we should also be focusing on how can we ensure that our children and grandchildren are going to be a part of a rich and diverse and deep Jewish community and experiencing the joy of Jewish life and the literacy of Jewish life and the ritual of Jewish life. And I just think we spend too much time in services talking about hot button issues rather than talking about doubling down and tripling down on being Jewish.
Beautiful. I agree with that. I want to just cite David Brooks here. David Brooks from the New York Times. He had a great piece on love. And he speaks about the fact that we have an inverted theory of love. That love, we tend to think that love blooms when somebody else makes you feel understood and good about yourself. He points out that love's not an emotion. It kicks up a lot of emotions, but it's a motivational state. It's a desire to be close to and serve another. What we have in the Jewish people very often right now, this would be my Rosh Hashanah speech, is we have this desire to feel loved. We have a desire for others to make us feel good. But that's an inverted theory of love. If we want to actually engage in a loving relationship, to love Israel, to love the Jewish people, to love God, to love the broader world, it's not to wait until each of these areas shows love to you. What David Brooks talks about is that to love is to actually make sure that you drive that emotional state, not to wait until others show that love to you. And I think that for the Jewish people around the world, we're struggling to say, I want to love Israel only if Israel is exactly my values. To love Israel is to activate that by showing that love to Israel, to the Jewish people, to God, by acting in that sort of way. And then by doing that, that will lead to an actual loving relationship.
Wow, beautiful.
Rivki, could I take host's privilege?
Please.
Okay, I'm going to call on somebody here. I'm going to call on Noam Jacobson, a lead singer of the Maccabees. My dear friend, Noe.
So, question for you. First of all, great job.
Project, Noe.
You and I were teachers together in a day school in Los Angeles, and I know that you stay in touch with a lot of your students, some of them here today. So, my question for you is, what's one idea that you think has really resonated with your students about Israel and has been really important for them in this moment?
It's beautiful, Noe. For me, it's like I can think of like specific topics we studied. We spoke about all things related to how you deal with authority, how you deal with legal systems, how you engage in the Jewish story. I think that what I would hope that they remember, we could talk about, by the way, when I think about this, like we always debated which one is the ideal religious behavior. Is it Abraham in the binding of Isaac when he submits himself, or is it Abraham in the story of Sodom when he barters and fights? Which one do you want to be? How do you contend with divine morality? I think they would think about that often, but I always wanted them, no matter what, on these papers when we study these things, I always wanted them to feel like they have skin in the game, like they have a stake in this. I wouldn't tell them you have to think of Abraham this model or Abraham that model. I want you to have the literacy of understanding these two different models of Abraham, and then for you to make your own thoughtful decision on where you stand on this issue. But to be in conversation continually. But really, I think that the thing, hopefully, that they would remember is, and the thing that matters the most, is the thing people care about the most is being cared about. And I just hope that they felt like I cared.
I'm sorry to do this. We have so many good questions, but we got to call it. We're going to do one last question, which actually came from a longtime listener, and this was actually an email that came in. Becky from Detroit. Becky's actually here tonight. Becky contacted us a few months ago. She told us that she and her 18-year-old daughter, Alyssa, are massive fans. Alyssa is leaving, I think it's literally tomorrow morning. She's about to go on her gap year to Israel, and they couldn't miss this show. They had to be here tonight. And I know they're here. It's very bright, but, there we go. I see a wave. All right. But what Alyssa and Becky contacted us is to ask whether you, Noam, and you, Dan, if you have any words of wisdom for Alyssa. She's about to embark on kind of the next stage in her life, right? She's going to Israel. She's going to college. She's moving on. What can you speak to her? What sort of words can you share with her as she enters this next phase?
Alyssa?
Yes.
Alyssa, where are you at? Hey, Alyssa. Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts. I'll keep it brief though. 2 thoughts.
Sure.
Thought number 1 is when you go to Israel, see Israel. See Israel. What do I mean by see Israel? You could either see one type of Israel, which is like a small sliver of Israel, which a lot of people do their year when they gap year in Israel. They see a tiny, tiny part of it. But see Israel, real Israel. See mythical Israel, and Israel should always feel mythical in many ways to you, but also see real Israel. Go to different parts of Israel. See Tel Aviv, see Haifa, see all different parts of Jerusalem, and take that in. I think that sometimes what happens when people go to Israel for the year is they see a very, very small sliver of Israel, and that becomes their identity. I strongly encourage you to see the vibrancy, the democracy, the debates. It's invigorating, and be part of it. Really, really, really be part of it. I think that's advice number 1. Number 2 is this: don't follow when people are trying to be haters, or they're trying to be indoctrinating towards you, or they're trying to be propagandistic, or they're trying to be anti in some ways. Don't respond equally. Don't respond that way. Fight their indoctrination with education. And that is the way I think that the Jewish people will really grow up and really grow out of the challenges that we're facing right now. So thanks for being here, Alyssa.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I'm going to imagine a world, I don't know where you're going to college, Alyssa, when you come back, but let's just assume it's hostile to Jews, as many colleges are. I'll assume that. It's all on gradations of hostility. The education you will gain by osmosis, a version of what Noam was just saying, by just being there and living and experiencing all these aspects and all these walks of Israeli life. As Noam was speaking, I was thinking, I did a year in Israel while I was in college. I studied for a year at the Hebrew University. And the time I spent from volunteering on an Israeli political campaign just to learn about Israeli politics, to helping out an American journalist that was based in Israel with whom I spent a weekend in the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza, which I would not recommend doing now. I spent a Shabbat in Hebron with settlers living in Hebron. I mean, just all these walks of life, some of these very left-wing Israeli NGOs that I was doing research with for one of my classes. I spent time with them. You will be so equipped on campus by just having this access and experience and points of contact in the mosaic of Israeli society that will make you such a powerful advocate for Israel, better than any set of talking points you could ever memorize.
Thank you.
And Alyssa, we couldn't let you go to Israel without, we have a little bag of goodies for you. We have signed poster. We have a lot of things going on, so we'll get that to you as soon as the show is over. Now we're going to go to our final part here. Before we wrap, I'm going to disappear. I'm going to invite Noam to close the show, as regular listeners know well, with the 5 fast facts from this episode, along with his 1 enduring lesson. And you're really seeing the behind the scenes, because I'm going to literally hand Noam my laptop with 5 fast facts on it.
This is what we do. Thank you, Rifki. So that's the story. Here are your 5 fast facts. Number 1, it's possible to get kosher meat in Baghdad, but only when schlepped from 600 miles away by U.S. soldiers. Number 2, The MVP of Camp David is controversial. Both Begin and Sadat put their careers on the line for peace, and Sadat even sacrificed his life when he was assassinated 4 years later. Number 3, less than 2 decades later, Israeli Prime Minister Rabin would sacrifice everything in his attempt to bring peace. His assassination was a watershed moment in Israeli history, and it's tantalizing to imagine what could have happened if he had not been killed. Number 4, whether Israel has a PR problem or an Israel problem, and maybe both are kind of true, maybe not, Israel is a regular country. Israel is, I actually don't view Israel as a regular country, I view Israel as an exceptional country, but Israel is a country. It is a country, one that is held to a different standard than the rest of the world's countries. And number 5, diaspora Jewry doesn't have to put up and shut up, but they don't have to bang on the drums against Israel either. As you would with any member of your family, give Israel the benefit of the doubt. Those are your 5 fast facts. Those are your 5 fast facts, but here's one enduring lesson as I see it. There is a Hasidic story from the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, a rabbi by the name of Nachman of Breslov. It's a story I think about very often, Dan. It's sometimes called the Turkey Prince. The story goes like this. A prince wakes up one morning convinced that he's not a prince at all, convinced that he is a turkey. He strips off his clothes. He crawls under the royal table. He begins eating scraps from the floor. The king and queen are devastated, and they bring in doctors and wise men to cure him. One after another, they try different methods, reasoning with him. They're either yelling at him, they're scolding him, they even mock him, they punish him. Nothing is working. It's an odd story, but finally a sage comes along. He doesn't argue, he doesn't shame. Instead, he takes off his own clothes, sits down under the table, and says, I'm a turkey too. Slowly, once the prince trusts him, the sage begins to suggest little changes. He says, turkeys can wear shirts, can't they? The prince nods, and they both put on shirts. Then turkeys can eat at the table, right? It's possible. And together, they climb back up. Step by step, the sage shows the prince that he can remain who he is, but also live fully in this world. Yes, it's a little bit of a strange story, but the message is powerful. This is what I take from it. True change and healing, they don't often come from force or from standing above someone and demanding that they be different. It won't often work. It comes from something else. It comes from genuinely understanding who you're talking to, genuinely understanding your audience, genuinely understanding the other, genuinely demonstrating and showing compassion and empathy, entering another person's world and slowly, patiently walking with them towards something better. It teaches that leadership is not about hierarchy, it's about relational wisdom. It's about being willing to sit under the table before you invite someone to join you above it. And the reality is, for so many of us, we tend to think of ourselves as the wise person in this parable, going to the young people under the table who just don't get it. But we're also the prince, the turkey under the table at times also. And we need others to help us be understood as well. It's a lesson that resonates so deeply with me when I think about Israel, about Jewish history, and about what Dan, I think what you and I are both trying to do with our podcast. We live in a moment where everyone is shouting at one another. Be like me. See the world the way I see it. Change immediately. You're wrong about everything. But history shows us that transformation rarely happens that way. Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs, even Jews with each other, we can't simply force the other to accept our truth. Change becomes possible when we show we're willing to listen, to meet people where they are, to build trust first. And here's the kicker. Like I said, we are not the sage always. All of us are also the prince. We all have moments when we're stuck under that table, when we need someone else to meet us where we are, to remind us that we can take the next step. So maybe that's the enduring lesson. Maybe that's what it is. Whether we are leading a country, running a business, raising kids, hosting a podcast, we're young professionals, whatever we are, all of us have the capacity to be that wise sage, to choose empathy, to walk alongside, and to help others rise up. And we all need people who will do the same for us. That's the work. That's the hope. Thank you so much.